What if I told you that some of the cigar advice you feel most confident about, the stuff you've repeated in lounges with absolute certainty, is completely wrong? Not small preferences, but the kind of beliefs that shape how you buy, store, and judge every cigar you smoke.
Welcome to the Cigar and Whiskey Podcast, where every episode takes you deeper into the stories, traditions, and flavors that make cigars and spirits unforgettable. So pour a glass, light a stick, and settle in.
Hey everybody, I'm Bo, and welcome back to Smoke Signals. Today we're stepping into slightly dangerous territory. We're questioning cigar wisdom that sounds experienced, feels traditional, and gets repeated so often it practically qualifies as doctrine. I've got Abby in the studio with me, because if I'm going to challenge some sacred cows, I'd prefer not to do it alone. Abby, how confident are you feeling about your cigar knowledge at this moment?
I was confident 5 minutes ago. Now I feel like I should apologize to everyone I've ever given advice to.
That's healthy. Growth begins with mild discomfort. We're tackling 7 of the most persistent cigar myths out there, the kind that influence how people choose wrappers, judge ash, store humidors, and sometimes look down at the guy next to them. Some of these myths have a grain of truth. That's what makes them dangerous. They sound smart. They spread easily, and they stick around for decades. Today, we're separating ritual from reality, without ruining anyone's favorite smoke. So settle in, 7 myths, calm debate, possibly a few bruised egos, including ours. Let's start with the one that refuses to die. Darker wrappers automatically mean stronger cigars. You hear it everywhere. You see a dark, oily Maduro, and you instinctively brace yourself. It looks bold. It looks heavy. It looks like something that should come with a warning label.
I mean, visually it just feels stronger. Dark roast coffee hits harder. Dark chocolate tastes richer. My brain connects dark with intense.
And that connection is exactly why this myth survives. It feels logical. But wrapper color mostly comes from fermentation and how long the leaf was worked. A Maduro spends more time fermenting, which breaks down starches and brings out natural sugars. That often creates sweetness, not strength. Strength, meaning nicotine punch, is largely determined by the filler blend, especially how much ligero the blender uses. Ligero leaves grow at the top of the plant, get the most sun, and carry the most nicotine. That's where the real horsepower lives.
So a light Connecticut could secretly be a heavyweight?
Oh, absolutely. I've had mild-looking Connecticut cigars that crept up on me halfway through and made me sit down and take notice. And I've had dark, intimidating Oscuros that were smooth, balanced, and surprisingly mellow the entire way. The wrapper absolutely affects flavor. It can add sweetness, spice, earth, cocoa, all kinds of character. But it doesn't act like a strength dial you can read by color alone. That's just our brains filling in the blanks. Part of the confusion comes from market trends. Dark wrappers are often paired with fuller blends because people expect them to be bold. So the color gets credit for something the filler did. The visual reinforces the experience. If you really want to know how strong a cigar might be, ask about the blend. Ask about the filler. The outside may look intimidating, but the real story is always on the inside. All right, let's move into slightly more controversial territory. Cuban cigars are automatically the best. This one gets said with confidence, sometimes with a little smirk, like it's not even up for discussion.
Okay, but I have to admit something. The first serious cigar I ever bought was Cuban. I paid more than I should have, and I remember thinking, well, this must be elite because it's Cuban. That was the whole logic.
And that's exactly how powerful the mystique is. Cuba absolutely earned its reputation. The soil in regions like Vuelta Abajo is phenomenal. For decades, Cuban cigars were the benchmark. If you smoked premium cigars, you were probably smoking Cuban.
And honestly, that one was good, but I also remember feeling like I was trying to convince myself it was better than it actually tasted, like I wanted it to live up to the story.
That's such an honest reaction, and it's common. After the revolution, many of the most skilled cigar families left Cuba. They took seeds, knowledge, and blending expertise to Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. The talent didn't disappear. It relocated. Over the years, those countries refined their craft. In many cases, they built more consistent production and quality control systems. That doesn't mean Cuba fell apart. It means the playing field expanded and leveled out. Excellence spread.
So when people say Cubans are the best, they're really talking about history as much as flavor?
Exactly. A great Cuban cigar can be incredible. Unique profile, distinct character. But automatic superiority? That's nostalgia mixed with branding. In blind tastings, top Nicaraguan and Dominican cigars regularly compete at the same level, sometimes higher. The best cigar isn't defined by geography. It's defined by craftsmanship and how it tastes to you. If you love Cubans, enjoy them. Just don't assume greatness only grows on one island. The world caught up a long time ago. All right, let's talk about the sacred rule. The one printed on humidors and repeated like gospel. Store your cigars at 70% humidity and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The famous 70-70 rule.
That's not a myth, though. That's just how you do it. I've told people that with full confidence, more than once.
And you weren't crazy. The rule made sense, especially decades ago when Cuban cigars dominated the market. Cuban soil and climate tends to grow thinner leaves. They didn't swell as aggressively at higher humidity levels. But the market isn't Cuban-dominated anymore. A lot of today's Nicaraguan and Honduran cigars use thicker, hardier leaves. Those leaves absorb more moisture. At 70%, they can swell more, tighten up, and burn less cleanly.
So I might not hate that one cigar I blame for burning weird?
Exactly. The environment changed. The tobacco changed. But the advice didn't evolve as quickly. At 70%, many modern cigars feel slightly over-humidified. The draw tightens. The burn slows. Flavors can taste muted. And here's where it gets practical. Drop that humidity to 65 to 68%, and something interesting happens. The burn sharpens. The smoke feels cleaner. The flavors become more defined instead of slightly damp and heavy.
So it's not that 70 was wrong, it's that the cigars changed.
There's a very real chance it wasn't the cigar. It might have been your humidor giving it a spa day it didn't ask for. And once temperatures creep over 70 degrees, mold and beetles start getting comfortable too. The 70-70 rule isn't dangerous. It's just dated. Think of it as the old standard that worked beautifully for a different era of tobacco. Modern cigars often prefer a slightly drier environment. Your humidor isn't sacred scripture. It's adjustable. And sometimes moving that dial down just a few points changes everything. All right, let's talk about the movie move. Dipping your cigar in liquor makes it better. You've seen it. Someone slowly lowers the end of a cigar into a glass of whiskey like they've just discovered some elite ritual only true insiders understand.
I'll admit something. The first time I saw that, I thought it looked refined. Like you were infusing the cigar with the spirit.
That logic makes sense on the surface. The problem is tobacco doesn't behave like that. It absorbs liquid fast. When you dip the head of the cigar, that section swells, tightens up, and starts burning unevenly. You're not enhancing it. You're destabilizing it. A premium cigar is already blended with precision. The wrapper, binder, and filler were chosen to create a specific progression of flavor. When you soak the end, you override that balance and replace it with damp combustion and alcohol heat.
I figured the alcohol would soak in and add flavor, almost like marinating something before you cook it. That actually explains something. I tried it once years ago and remember thinking the cigar suddenly tasted harsh, but I assumed it was just a strong blend. I didn't connect it to the fact that I had basically soaked the tip in bourbon.
The subtle notes disappear. The sweetness, the spice, the transitions, they get drowned out. Instead of cigar and whiskey complementing each other, they compete. And usually the alcohol wins in the worst way. The right move is less theatrical. Take a puff, let it settle, then take a sip. Let the flavors meet naturally instead of forcing them together. That's pairing, not soaking, not baptizing, just alternating. Now yes, Arnold once told a story about brushing his cigar with tequila. And if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger celebrating a victory, you can absolutely get away with it. The rest of us? Let's just keep our cigars out of the glass. All right, let's tackle the one that fools even seasoned smokers. A perfectly white ash means you're smoking a high-quality cigar. You see that long, solid, snow-white stack, and it feels impressive, Instagram-worthy, almost competitive.
I've absolutely looked at someone's ash and thought, okay, that's a serious cigar. It feels like proof. like the cigar is burning clean because it's better tobacco.
That's the key. Ash color has far more to do with soil composition than quality. Specifically, mineral content like calcium and magnesium affects how light the ash burns. Whiter ash doesn't mean better tobacco. It means different dirt. Some of the most respected tobacco regions in the world produce what's called a salt and pepper ash, more gray than white. Nobody in their right mind would call those cigars inferior. But the white ash myth survives because it looks impressive.
That's actually humbling. I remember holding a cigar once trying not to tap it because I wanted the ash to grow long and look solid. I thought that meant I had picked something premium. Now I'm realizing I was basically admiring mineral content.
You weren't alone. A firm ash that holds well can indicate solid construction and long filler tobacco. That part has merit. But the color itself? That's just chemistry. It doesn't measure age. It doesn't measure blending skill. It doesn't measure flavor. The real indicators of quality are draw, burn consistency, flavor progression, and balance. Ash color is cosmetic. It's the cigar equivalent of judging a book by how white the paper looks after you burn it. So if your ash is bright white, enjoy it. If it's gray, enjoy it. Just don't assume one is superior. The cigar doesn't know what color it turned after combustion. And frankly, it doesn't care. All right, let's talk about the romantic one. Aging cigars always makes them better. There's something deeply satisfying about a box sitting quietly in a humidor for years, slowly becoming smoother and more refined.
I've definitely bought cigars and thought, I'm going to sit on these for a few years. It feels disciplined, mature, like I'm resisting the urge to open a gift too early.
And here's where we need nuance. A little aging? Absolutely beneficial in many cases. Years ago, manufacturers often aged boxes for months, sometimes even a year, before they ever hit store shelves. Demand today is different. Under modern production pressures, cigars often leave the factory much sooner after being rolled. They're ready to smoke, but they may still be settling. Giving them a few months, sometimes up to a year, can allow the blend to marry and stabilize.
So if I buy a box and let it rest for 6 months, that's not some fantasy ritual? That could actually improve the experience?
Very often, yes. Especially with fuller blends. A short rest can smooth edges and bring cohesion. But here's the part people oversimplify. Aging is not a straight upward line forever. After a couple of years, you often hit diminishing returns. Strong cigars can mellow beautifully for a while, but milder blends can start losing character. Subtle notes fade. What was vibrant becomes soft. What was complex becomes quiet.
That actually explains something. I aged a lighter cigar for a few years and convinced myself it had become refined, but looking back, it just tasted less lively.
That's the trap. Smoother doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it just means less expressive. Aging works best when it's intentional and measured. Try one fresh. Try one 6 months later. Try one at 2 years. Time can enhance a cigar. It can also slowly erase parts of it. The goal isn't to collect trophies in your humidor. It's to find the moment when that blend tastes its best to you. A little patience can help. A lot of patience isn't always an upgrade. All right, last one. Bigger cigars are stronger. This one feels obvious at first glance. You see a massive 60-ring gauge cigar and assume it's going to knock you into next week.
I mean, visually, it makes sense. Bigger object, bigger impact. If someone hands me a giant cigar, I brace myself. I assume I need food, water, and possibly supervision.
That reaction is completely normal. But strength in a cigar doesn't come from size. It comes from the blend. Specifically how much Ligero tobacco is in the filler. That's the leaf carrying most of the nicotine punch. A thinner cigar can be packed with high Ligero content and hit like a freight train. Meanwhile, a large format cigar can be blended with milder leaves and deliver a smooth, easygoing experience that surprises you.
So what you're saying is, size doesn't matter?
It matters for time commitment. That's it. Let's behave. What really determines strength is the tobacco composition. Size changes burn time and how flavors evolve. Larger ring gauges often burn cooler and can feel creamier because there's more filler relative to wrapper. But nicotine strength isn't measured in inches. Think of it like coffee. A tiny espresso can hit harder than a giant mug of watered-down brew. The cup size doesn't determine caffeine. The contents do.
That actually makes me rethink a few purchases. I've avoided bigger cigars thinking they'd overwhelm me and chased smaller ones assuming they were safer. Turns out I was just guessing based on optics.
We all do. Our brains equate scale with intensity, but in cigars, the better question isn't how big is it, it's what's in it. Blend trumps size every time. So if you've been choosing by intimidation factor, it might be time to adjust the strategy. Ask about the filler. Ignore the visual assumptions. In cigars, as in most things, composition beats appearance. So we've just poked at 7 pretty persistent cigar myths. Dark wrappers, Cuban supremacy, sacred humidity rules, liquor dipping, white ash flexing, aging everything forever, and the eternal size debate.
I have to admit, this is slightly humbling. None of these myths sounded ridiculous when I first heard them. They sounded experienced. That's what makes them stick.
That's exactly it. Most cigar myths aren't malicious. They're half-true ideas repeated confidently. And confidence spreads faster than nuance, especially in a lounge where nobody wants to sound unsure.
I think that's part of it. When you're newer, you want rules. You want simple formulas. Dark equals strong. White ash equals quality. 70/70 equals correct. It feels comforting to have clear answers.
And there's nothing wrong with starting there. Rules help you begin. The problem is when the rules never evolve. The cigar world changes. Tobacco changes. Production changes. But the advice sometimes stays frozen in time.
What I'm taking from this is that none of these are black and white. There's context, there's history, there's preference. It's less about being right and more about understanding why something works.
That's the whole point. Cigars are meant to be enjoyed, not passed like trivia tests. If something tastes good to you, that matters more than whether the ash was Instagram ready. The real upgrade in this hobby isn't memorizing slogans. It's asking better questions. What's in the blend? How was it stored? What does this actually taste like to me?
And maybe not arguing with strangers about wrapper color.
That would be a strong start. If this episode challenged something you believed, drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know which myth surprised you most. And if there's one we missed, we might need a part 2. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe. It helps more than you think. We've got more conversations like this coming. Calm, curious, and occasionally myth-busting. Until next time, smoke what you enjoy, question what you hear, and don't dip your cigar unless your last name is Schwarzenegger.
Thanks for listening to the Cigar and Whiskey podcast. Subscribe and share with a fellow aficionado, and keep the journey going at cigarandwhiskeyguide.com, where every puff and pour has a story.